Sometimes it happens. You lose a client. It may or may not have been your fault. That part doesn't really matter. What matters is treating the client well on their way out the door. I think handling client offboarding smartly is one of the best ways to move forward. Losing a client stinks, but it doesn't have to be permanent, and it doesn't have to sink your company. My name is Adam Henneman. Welcome to Ramblings of a Geek. I've seen clients come, I've seen clients go. Sometimes they left because of things outside our control, and sometimes, well, the client had a point. Running an MSP is really hard, and keeping everybody happy all the time is next to impossible. We all know what it's like to have an MSP transition not go very well, right? Especially if you're taking on a brand new client and the losing MSP makes your life difficult. Today's video is going to be all about the best practices for offboarding a client well. Let's start at the beginning, your client contract. Do you have verbiage in your contract about onboardings and offboardings? If not, I think it's a good practice to have that information in your contracts, because your contracts are all about setting expectations and managing expectations as you work through the relationship. Now, if you don't have it in your contract now, it's not a thing you need to like drop everything and go deal with. But the next time you do a contract upgrade, I think I might lean into that and make sure that you've tidied up that language a little bit, because again, I think it's really important. The next section is, do you bill for an offboarding? And the first place I want you to look is in your contract. If it's there and it says you're going to bill for it, then go ahead and bill for it. If it's not there or it's ambiguous, you might have a little bit tougher road to get that to be a billable thing. Either way, it's all about setting expectations. I think it's perfectly fine to bill for an offboarding as long as everybody's on the same page. And especially if you're going to have to jump through a bunch of hoops for the client or for the new MSP coming in, set expectations and be upfront with people as you go. I also think it's important to build a repeatable offboarding process. Now, hopefully you aren't offboarding clients frequently, but this is one of those things you want to do well when they happen and not have to reinvent the wheel every single time it comes up. So if you've never had to offboard someone before, or you've been kind of doing it by whatever feels right, I think now is the time to upgrade that process and write some stuff down. Think a little bit about how you want to be handed a client when you onboard them, and write the process so that you're handing things off the way you want them to be handed to you. I like to think of this as the MSP golden rule. Hand off a client how you want them to be handed off to you. If you do that well for your clients, it's good for everybody. What information should you hand over might be another question you want to think about. And in my mind, the client owns their data. Now, you are the MSP, you own your own proprietary methods and all those other things, but the client owns the documentation of their network. They own their passwords. I think you should hand that documentation over as efficiently as you possibly can. You want to make exporting the information out of your systems as easy as possible. If you have to jump through a bunch of hoops and recreate a bunch of stuff, that's going to be bad for everybody, and you're going to miss some stuff, which could cause some frustration down the line. So make it as easy as possible for you to export that data and give them a clear copy of their documentation. Now, if you have to do things like reset passwords and those kinds of things because you're using kind of a shared firewall login or something like that, then yeah, absolutely go ahead and do that. Change the passwords, hand it over to them, and get out of the way. Now, when you hand over the documentation, I really think you should be handing it to the client themselves, not just to the other MSP. Now, you might copy both parties, but make sure the client is copied on basically all of your communications with the other MSP, so that way the client knows that you're responding professionally and timely in all of those things. It wouldn't be the first time I had an incoming MSP not have their onboarding process put together, and we looked like saviors because we did all of the pieces to hand things off to them, and we actually ended up retaining that client because we handled our business well and the incoming MSP did not. Think about that as you get ready to hand off the information to another MSP and to your client. If you're getting value out of this video, do me a favor, hit that like button. Also hit that subscribe button. Both help me a lot on YouTube. It goes a long way to help grow this channel. The next section is, what does your transition period look like? What does that look like for the client? What does it look like for the incoming MSP? Those kinds of things. I think a 60-day transition period makes a lot of sense, where the client gives you 60 days notice. The first 30 days are sort of business as usual while you're starting to kind of set things up for the incoming MSP. The second 30 days becomes where the other MSP takes over and you remove your tools and the documentation gets handed over and all those pieces. I think something like that makes a lot of sense, because again, you want this to be as seamless as it possibly can be for your outgoing client. Because even if you want them to leave, even if they're not a great client for you, even if they're making your life difficult, you still want to be the bigger person. You want to take the high road as much as possible. So what do you do when the incoming MSP needs help or has some questions during the transition period? So I think it's easy if they're just asking some basic questions. You answer them as best as you possibly can. But if they need actual help or training or for you to log in to show them some stuff, I think that's probably billable work that you want to make sure that it gets addressed appropriately. Now, you also need to remind yourself that this other incoming MSP, they're humans too, right? And we all work in the same industry, and it's not an easy industry to be in. Treat them well. Maybe don't go out of your way to help them a ton, but at least be human with them. And at the end of the day, having a decent relationship with another MSP in the area, even if they're a competing MSP, isn't a terrible idea. One thing I haven't talked about yet is what should you do if you're the one firing the client? I think you should give them notice, just like you should based on what your contract says, and then follow the termination period. Now, it becomes incumbent on them to find a new MSP, so give them their 60-day notice or whatever that looks like. Make sure they understand what that process looks like for them, and that you have your own process put together that you're going to give them data on X day and whatever else, and let them go find their other MSP. Now, if after 60 days they haven't found another MSP, you have a couple options. You could continue to service them month by month, or you could just say, you know what, we're done with you guys, we're moving on, this is just not worth it for us. Either way, I think is fine as long as you're clear about that communication. Offboarding clients doesn't feel good. Losing clients sucks. But remember, if you handle this situation well and transition them well to the new MSP and that new MSP drops the ball, they're much more likely to come back to you knowing that you are a professional organization that had their best interest in mind. Keep your head up, handle the process well, and live to fight another day. Thanks for coming on this roundtable with me, and I hope to see you on the next one.